All right, thank you for that. Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Team Strengthscape. My name is Aishani, and I would like to bring to you a series of webinars, Christine, learning shots in this rather unusual month of April. I would like to run a few checklist items before we start the webinar. First, I request all the participants to remain on mute at all times. Second, ask the questions as soon as you have one. 3. Please put your comments and questions on chat only and we will answer it from there. As you all are experiencing unprecedented lockdown, we are all here to help you and make the best of your time at home. Learning Shots webinar series is meant to provide you a deep dive into two major aspects of any learning journey. First one, a walkthrough of the Everything DiSC reports by John Wiley and Sons, and a deep dive into the art and science of instructional design. We focus on DiSC because several of our customers have continued to roll out the DiSC assessments virtually in spite of the COVID-19 situation, and it's important to select the right assessment for your learning need. Secondly, while the training deliveries may see a dip, we all continue to prepare training content and be prepared for the upcoming programs better. So without much ado, I would like to start with introduction to our firm and then move on to today's webinar. Strengthscape is an organizational development company headquartered in Bangalore, and we help organizations create mechanisms for development, motivation, commitment, creativity that enable employees to give their best every day. To bring onto the best to your table, we have partnered with Wiley for Everything DiSC products, my bad, central test for psychometric assessments, Skillsoft for their off-the-shelf e-learning content. Our offerings include HR certifications, competency mapping, technical training, psychometric assessments, behavioral training, digital learning, OD consulting, team building, image consulting, executive coaching, and many more. Our facilitators for the day is Akash Chandar. Akash is the founder of Strengthscape, an experienced leadership coach and our master trainer for DiSC certification and its rollout programs. And that's me, Ashani. I am the business analyst at Strengthscape. So for today, the topic is Everything DiSC 363 for leaders. Akash has recently completed a comprehensive leadership development assignment for a French firm using the tool. So I'm going to hand over it to him to help you better understand the assessment. Akash, many of us have heard about the 360 assessments. Not sure why this is called 363. If you could very quickly clarify and we could begin.
Great, absolutely. Thank you so much, Shani, for that introduction. Happy to have all of you here. Today we're going to discuss a leadership assessment called 363 for leaders. It's called 363 because it's essentially a 360 assessment that provides 3 strategies for development. So I guess there is a bit of marketing and branding there coming into the report's name, and that's why it's called 363. You might have seen a number of leadership assessments that involve raters, involve reportees, direct reports, managers, peers, people around in the ecosystem who are used to, who provide feedback to the leader. There is enough and more literature around leadership today. A lot of that literature talks about the importance of feedback. Right? There's a great saying as well that feedback, leaders really survive on feedback. It's something which should be a part of their daily diet. 363 for leaders has some unique features, and it helps us understand leaders. I believe that one of the critical aspects of 363 is that it addresses the question of what the leadership brand should be. and it helps respondents become better leaders by improving their brand recall, by improving their brand value. So I'm going to start this webinar by asking you a question. You have the chat there. Please try and describe what you mean by leadership brand. I'm going to wait for a couple of answers before moving forward. So please put on chat what you think is the meaning of leadership brand. Okay, I'm waiting for a couple of answers to come in. Any definition would do. One or two words around what you think is the meaning of leadership brand. Santosh, that's your unique leadership style. Okay, what's unique about you? What differentiates you? That could perhaps be a part of leadership brand. Yes, fantastic. Thanks so much for that. Anyone else? A brand with the highest market share, we name. Okay, that's perhaps the brand that a leader who's well known within the team, or perhaps a commodity that has the that's most popular. Okay, fantastic. All right. Now there are multiple ways of looking at leadership brands. One way of looking at leadership brand is from the perspective of what you're known for, what differentiates you, what makes you popular, as both of you have also said here. And as Rishi is saying here, it refers to developing exceptional managers with a distinct set of talents that are uniquely geared to fulfill customers' expectations. Fantastic definition, Rishi. I'm going to take something, out of all of these and kind of give you a definition, which I believe is something that 360 essentially and two, the results that a leader drives, which is really his deeds. So from the perspective of a brand, you have a strong brand if you say and if you're known for something and you actually deliver results in that area. If there is if what you're known for and how people know you and how you come across and what you say is same as what you deliver, then you have a strong brand. If there is a gap between what you say and what you do, then that's a weak brand. Brands typically aren't good or bad. Brands are strong or weak. And this report helps you determine where you have certain strengths in your leadership brand and where would you need to plug some of the uh, you know I can call them leaks and gaps in your leadership brand. Okay, so we're talking about brand as a gap between what you say, what you're known for, what your reputation is, and what you do. It's between what you're known for and what results you drive. That's the gap there is really the area for your leadership brand to play. Lesser the gap, stronger the brand. All right. So, um, as we go through this, please feel free to download the report. I'm going to ask my colleagues also to put this link on the chat if you like to download the report, sample report that we have on our website. You could download it from there, and this will help you to navigate through the report as we understand 360 people leaders. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's start the journey with a quick agenda. What we're going to do now is we're going to explore the 360 assessment. We're going to see how it enables leaders to improve their effectiveness. We're going to understand the 8 approaches uh, which are really the hallmark of the 363 report, and understand how different groups of raters actually influence the leadership perception or the leadership reputation and brand, of a person. Right? So let's start with the first thing. What you have on the screen are three simple images. The first one is the book, Eight Dimensions of Leadership. This is the book that uh, really defines the model, the leadership model on which this assessment is based. John Wiley and Son works extensively with DiSC, and it is partnered with various organizations. It carries out various research, extensive research in the area of leadership and management. And this book is a part of that research. It gives you a very nice, detailed perspective of what the leadership model is, and the one that we're going to talk about today. The second aspect here is the DiSC model. Now, the 363 for leaders is based on the 8 dimensions of leadership, and also it's not mentioned in the report explicitly, but it is really working behind the scenes. It's helping you to understand what your priorities are, and your behavioral aspects are. Many of you here are DiSC certified with us, so you understand DiSC as a model. DiSC is a behavioral model that helps you, that bucket people on a very in four broad buckets. It clusters behaviors into four broad buckets, and it helps you understand the strengths and challenges of various people, behavioral strengths and challenges of various people. So that's another part of the assessment. The core of the 360 assessment is the model which you see on the right hand side. Now, if you want to see this model in a bit more detail, I like you to um, uh, see two things there. First, there are words around the circle. That's the first part of the model. What you see here, and that really maps to the DiSC priorities completely. If you look at pioneering, which is right on top, it actually matches with the behavioral style, which are DNI, which is a combination of DNI. I think this report is a bit advanced, and so if anyone does not understand DiSC at all, you might want to refer to some of our previous webinars where we have actually discussed the DiSC behavioral model, and then build up on that to understand the 360 leaders. So the model completely maps on to the DiSC style. In the background, the assessment actually assesses what your DiSC priorities are, and those are the 8 approaches of leadership. What's inside those 8 approaches are the practices. Each of the approaches has 3 practices. So if you see, there is pioneering approach, and the pioneering approach consists of 3 practices: finding opportunities, strengthening the boundaries, stretching the boundaries, and promoting bold action. Those are the 3 practices that come under the approach of pioneer. What this really means is that uh, leaders tend to use one or two or more of these approaches more often than the other. They have a natural tendency to use certain approaches more often than other approaches, and that defines their leadership style. If you have a leader who's using commanding and pioneering approach more often, that perhaps that person has DI as a DiSC style. However, their leadership, the leadership perspective would really be that of commanding and pioneering approach. Uh, you could have one or two approaches. Now, what is also important to note is that if somebody has, let us say, a pioneering approach, then it's very likely that they would also have commanding or energizing approaches. They would be using those approaches often as well. So adjacent approaches are likely to be used more often. However, the person who has pioneering as a leadership approach is less likely or unlikely to use humble or inclusivity and deliberate as their leadership approaches very often. So diagonally opposite approaches are unlikely to be used. Adjacent approaches are more likely to be used together by a person. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions already that I must cover, because I'm now going to get into the assessment, and it is important that we understand the model before that. So please put your questions on the chat if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. Okay, let me move forward then. So we're looking at, we've discussed the DiSC model and the leadership model. We understand that 360 for leaders, you know, uh, has two perspectives, DiSC and the 360 model. Um, Moving forward, some of the key features of this report is that this report actually helps you understand what your DiSC style is. One, two, it helps you understand what others think is your style, and if there is a gap between the two, that's the branding gap that you have. I might believe that I'm a very humble person, but my team members believe that I'm not. And that's the branding gap that you have as a leader, and that's something that 363 uh, aims to bridge, to help you bridge as a leader. So that's the first thing. The second, of course, is that this page is about 26 pages, so it's a very detailed. It has a very detailed narrative. Uh, it uses the everything DiSC leadership model, and perhaps if you know of the credit system that Wiley has for buying credits, this assessment uses 50 credits. So it's one of the one of those assessments that's fairly, I would think it requires a higher investment, also because there are a number of raters involved, and it's an extensive leadership development journey that supports. Okay, so anyone with any questions still, please feel free to put them on the chat, and I'll make sure that I cover those questions as we go ahead with the webinar. Okay. So now the assessment essentially looks at, now what's the construct of the assessment? The construct of the assessment is that when you administer this, a link goes out to the respondent, who's the leader in the organization. I would typically apply this uh, assessment for senior leadership interventions. Uh, and I would typically try and have the entire leadership team, the management team, take the assessment, because there's great value in everyone being involved. So the leader gets a link. They need to respond to that. Uh, the link that the leader gets is something where uh, they respond to about 79 odd questions, which is essentially the DiSC questions, which are done on an adaptive mode, which means that you get 5 questions, 5 options to every question. And the questions could essentially be like, are you, let's say, are you usually bold in a party? And then you would have 5 options there, from uh, highly likely to unlikely, or very often to never. So you have a 5-point scale with a medium, the middle one, which is the neutral scale. So if you've not been for a party, then you can always mark neutral. If you don't relate to the question, mark as. So there's adaptive testing, which also makes the assessment very reliable, and also makes it easy for non-native English speakers to take the assessment. Um, so that's the part that the leaders get. Now the raters. There are uh, uh, raters who would get a similar assessment, similar one, but of course it takes much shorter time. Leaders on top of the DiSC assessment would also get a leadership uh, statements, which is essentially a set of 72 leadership behavioral statements, and uh, they need to select the one that they relate to. So it's a combination of two assessments. Combination of assessment, a DiSC assessment, which is 79 questions, plus on top of that, 72 leadership behavioral statements. For the raters, that's on my next slide. Uh, they get the 72 leadership behavioral statements, right? And they get to uh, then respond, based on how and what they see their leader, um, you know, use more often in their everyday work. So raters could be of multiple types. There are four categories of raters. There could be manager, your manager. You could have one manager or two managers. You could have peers, people who are probably at the same level, but they interact with you. Um, Three, you could have uh, direct reports, and four, you could have others. There are always other stakeholders outside of your immediate reporting line who would be uh, influencing your effectiveness as a leader on the day. So, both leaders and raters get a different link. They get a unique link, uh, but they are essentially rating on the same 72 to behavior. And that's how you get the gap, or the that's how you get to see if there is a gap between what leader thinks of herself and what the raters believe the leader demonstrates on a daily. So this is the cover page of the assessment. We are now getting into uh, four features, or the four parts of the assessment report. Now, if you actually scan through the assessment report, and I'm hoping that most of you have downloaded the assessment report from the link that we shared earlier and from the chat even now. There is an introduction part, there's a big picture part, detailed feedback part, there's the taking action part. Now, what are the key elements of the report? Let's just do a quick dive into it. The first page of the report, of course, is the cover page. In the second page, you see certain cornerstone principles. What this talks about, and I think it's important to again highlight the difference between a manager and a leader from this perspective. When we're talking about a manager, we're talking about a person who's managing tasks on a one-to-one basis. When I manage my team, and I delegate and direct and delegate my team members, when I develop my team members, when I have a feedback conversation with my team member, it's essentially a managerial task. But when I'm creating objectives for my business division, when I'm aligning a group of people to the goals of the organization, uh, when I'm creating project plans, those are tasks that influence or are communicated on a one-to-many basis, and therefore those are known as the leadership tasks. So DiSC has a very simple way of looking at the difference between managers and leaders. Managers are the ones who manage one-to-one communication, and leaders are the ones who manage one-to-one communication. People are not managers or leaders. Tasks are managerial or leadership. So the same person could have a few leadership tasks and a few managerial tasks to do on a day-to-day. And that's a difference that we must uh, keep in mind when we're looking at the leadership styles. So this report gives you, the cornerstone principles and tells you what this report is about. It's good to note that we're focusing on the interpersonal aspect of leadership. There are many other aspects of leadership, for example, intelligence, for example, uh, subject matter expertise. Those are not the aspects that leadership style, 360 leadership style, actually assesses. It just assesses the interpersonal part. Um, and as we said earlier, leaders are most likely to have certain strengths in one area. They may be using one, two, or three of these approaches, of the eight approaches, more often. So they have certain natural strengths in certain areas, and there may be others where they need more support. There are no good styles or bad styles. all styles are equally good. It's about which, what is your leadership brand? Is there a gap between what you say and what you do? That's what we will discuss. The assessment, you release the assessments for the raters. And in fact, Wiley makes it very easy to administer this assessment. There are, a whole lot of uh, templates available for releasing assessments, for ensuring that raters are properly uh, primed. They understand the purpose of the assessment. The leaders understand what the purpose of the assessment is. There are a good number of templates which are available. And I would request my colleagues to post a link on the chat that will give you, all those templates that you can use when you are releasing a 360 assessment. Okay. So if you look at the three-step process, the leaders, in this report, uh, what this does is that it helps understand how others see you as a leader. That's the first outcome. You explore your own tendencies of the 8 approaches. You understand which other approaches that you tend to use more often or less often, and then arrive at the 3 strategies for becoming an effective. Those are the 3 outcomes of taking this assessment for any leader. I'm going to pause again and see if there are questions. Please feel free to post them on the chat. Okay. Now, once you take the assessment and once the raters have provided you with feedback, this is the kind of map that you get. This map is gives you 2 perspectives. So if you see there are these 8 approaches around the circle, and then there are 2 maps. One, there's a self-rating, and then there are raters rating. Right? The dotted one is the self-rating. Now, let me help you read this specific map. This is a sample map. Right? So the dotted line is a result of the assessment that you took as a leader, and the blue part of it, the raters, the solid block, is the sum total of the rating given by the raters. And the raters were of 4 categories. Just to recollect, they were managers, direct reports, peers, and others. Right? Now, if you see here, let us take one example here of humble, and we see that um, there is this whole uh, perspective that I'm a humble leader, and so it's pretty close to the circumference, which means that on 7-point scale, uh, this person believes that he's probably 6 plus on humility, and this person's leadership approach is essentially a humble approach, right? But that's not what others feel. Others feel that this person's, they've scored him probably 5 plus, and so this element actually, uh, you know, gives you the gap in terms of humbleness as a leadership style, or using humble approach to leadership, and that's the leadership branding gap that this person has. On other accounts, we see that the gap is not so significant. Perhaps if you look at affirming and energizing, people around this leader also believe that this leader uses these approaches as often as the leader believes. But where does this person need to do more work is essentially the humble area, and perhaps even in the pioneering area. Now, the definition of each of these words and what each of these style uh, means is also given very well in the report. It's a fairly easy narrative in the report. So if you like to read that report, I'll invite you all to read that report as soon as possible. So yeah, so that was on reading this graph. Now, if you look at the next one, you know, The report also gives you these maps uh, broken down by the group. And we're talking about four set of raters. We're talking about four different categories of raters who you could have for in this assessment. The first one is the manager. The second is peers here. That's on the right top. And then you have direct report, and of course you have others. Right? That's the last one. Now there are some interesting things that you see in this profile, and this is really a sample profile. Uh, you know, uh, Perhaps this individual, this leader, is uses humble approach quite often with his manager. Okay? And so there is really no gap between what his manager and he believes in terms of his approach to leadership. Uh, I believe that I'm humble, and my leader also believes, my manager also believes that I'm humble, and so there is no gap in it. However, um, my brand with my team members has taken a bit of a hit. I believe that I'm very humble, but that's not what my team believes about me. And so you see that this report not only tells you where your leadership branding gaps are, um, it also tells you with which group what kind of gaps exist. And so you can actually improve your communication, you can improve your uh, the reputation with specific groups within the organization, and that's important for any leader. Similarly, if you see here, for peers and direct reports, there's a huge gap. This was for peers, and the gap for direct reports is, in fact, seems to be slightly more than that. Not so much of a gap for others, but perhaps a lot of gap for peers and direct. Okay, so let me again just see if there are any questions. Please feel free to ask questions. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Okay, so I'm then going to move forward. Um, you know, these are the four maps that we have actually snipped separately to help you understand those. Um, Now the report, now the narrative of the report. What the report does is that it takes each of those 8 approaches. Let me go back and show you the 8 approaches. These are the 8 approaches on the uh, around the circle. Now, each of these approaches have, as we saw earlier, 3 practices. So the report now tells you what is your score, what is the gap between how raters look at you and how you look at yourself uh, for each of the practices under each of the approaches. And so you get 24 sets of inputs to improve your leadership brand. I'm just going to run through one out of these all 24 to help you just understand how the report is structured. So if you look at it, the first one here, it gives you the highlight for the approach. It tells you where the gap is. For example, here it says you tend to rate yourself a little higher on pioneering approach than your raters do. So it's kind of giving you a statement about pioneering as an approach. Where are you versus your raters? Second, it tells you where the common areas are. There's only a moderate amount of agreement among your raters on how often you use pioneering approach. Because of this, you may notice contradictory comments from your raters. So it also tells you that not all feedback is clear feedback, and we need to make sense out of. We need to act on only that part of the feedback which is clear. Um, and so because a lot of raters have different kind of perspective around you, maybe you're not giving a very uh, synchronized, coherent message to your stakeholders, and therefore there is inconsistencies in the way people are looking at you as a leader. The third statement there is about what your manager thinks of you, and this is an important aspect because manager is always one of the important stakeholders for anyone working in an organization. So it gives you these highlights to begin with, and then it breaks down each of it gives you a graph, a linear graph, on how people have actually rated you. So if you see, there is S, which is for self, how you've rated yourself on pioneering, how your manager has rated you, how your peers have rated you, how your direct reports have rated you, and how others have rated you. And this gray line here actually shows you what is the range in which the responses actually appear. So there's a huge range, for peers, not so much of a range for direct reports. Most of the direct reports think in a simpler way, and it's all on a 7-point scale. So that's how you consistently get the results. So that's on the pioneering approach. Now, on a very similar front, very similarly, the report actually goes on and gives you feedback on all the 8 approaches, and helps you understand, uh, where your opportunities for development lie. So yeah, if you see the snippet here, we've kind of blown that up for you to understand that further. You see the gray lines here. This is giving you the range of responses. So, for example, in others, have rated you between 5 and 7. Direct reports have rated you between, let's say, 5.5 to 7. Peers have rated you pretty low, 4.5 to say 6.5. And so, what's the range of those ratings is also available right here on this graph. Okay, so that's the 363 report, and then the report goes on to give you something which is very valuable for each leader, and I think this is really the crux of the report. It tells you what are your greatest strengths as a leader, and goes on to tell you what are your top 3 development areas and development strategies you can apply. So look at the 3. This person, the first strength is being approachable, showing confidence, and taking charge. What this means is that this person, what do you mean by strength? What you mean by strength is what you do more often, not essentially means what you do perfectly well, but what you do more often. And so this leader uses being approachable, showing confidence, and taking charge, those 3 practices, more often than others. And therefore, they are his strength areas, right? There are also certain sub bullet points there. These are the bullet points that have been given by the raters. They've been selected by the raters. So you also get to know why, what are some of the areas which you do? What are some of the behaviors that you show more often within being approachable? And that's right here, if I can just mark that out, right? There's a very interesting aspect of this report, which is that it uses something called comment smart. What comment smart means is that it doesn't it helps you focus this report on development rather than just giving feedback. This report should not be used for performance feedback. This report should be used for development. When you ask people for feedback and you have, let's say, a text box in the assessment where people can actually either vent it out or kind of give you lots of compliments, sometimes the feedback becomes very objective, and it's difficult to work with that feedback. It's difficult to incorporate that feedback into your interpersonal communication. And so 363 for leaders actually doesn't give you uh, a text box. It doesn't give you a free box for you to actually vent it out as a rater. Uh, all you do is select the behaviors from a list, the ones that you think your leader demonstrates more of. And then you go on to select the behaviors you would like your leaders to develop or show more of. And so it only focuses the raters also to think about how to develop the leaders. And so it focuses the entire organization, all your raters, to think about what you can do better, as opposed to saying, oh, what do you do wrong or what you don't do well at the moment. So the entire context of this assessment and the entire context of rolling out this assessment is essentially developmental. It is it's a great assessment to support leadership teams. uh, we have had programs which have been year-long programs, and they've started with 360 for leaders, and we keep coming back to the assessment, keep coming back to the communication. Uh, that you can actually refine based on the results of this assessment. Another good aspect of this assessment is that there is no limit to the number of raters that you can have. You can have unlimited number of raters. Obviously, practically, you probably have 15 people or so in each bucket maximum, and you'll probably have only one or two managers. But the assessment does require that you have at least two people in each bucket, so that in each category of raters, so that there is confidentiality of the ratings that have been given. Only manager can be one, but other three categories need at least two raters, so that there is certain, so that the feedback is anonymous. So yeah, that's an important aspect of the assessment. Now you have similar insights on all other approaches. And interestingly, then it gives you the three strategies for development based on your strengths and the approaches that you do not use often. It gives you three strategies for development, and those strategies look pretty much like this. So, for example, for this person, it says what raters are saying is that you need to show more diplomacy, and then it goes on to suggest three strategies on how you could actually become show more diplomacy. And then there's an opportunity to say, okay, the one that I like to use, the suggestion that I like to accept, and put into practice, is the second one. I don't really have to go and accept all the suggestions given by the report, but I need to look at the one where which makes more sense in my role, in my context. And if you're a coach or a trainer who works with people, then it suggests certain actions that a person can take, and it's for the coach or the trainer to work it out with the leader, and figure out which is the one that they should take up, uh, for as a part of their development. So that's pretty much the report. There are also certain uh, follow-up reports which are available. There's a report for the facilitator, and there is a coaching supplement that comes with the report that's complementary, that tells you how to coach this person. What are the areas that you could focus on as a coach? And that's a absolutely phenomenal insight and input for coaches, because they can actually work with data, and they can make their work with their coaches, with leaders, very, very effective. So those are the two reports which are available. Maybe I'm going to request, uh, you would be able to download these reports from the same site, same link that was given earlier. Maybe we can post that again. So that's pretty much what we had. Going forward, we're doing a number of programs virtually. Strandscape's been focusing on virtual deliveries for 5 years now. Many of our certification programs are delivered online. Most of the people who are certified with us get an opportunity to do a refresher on a complimentary basis anytime they want to log into our certifications. So here's what's coming up. There's instructional designing, competency mapping, and DiSC certification. Those are the three which are coming up soon. Obviously, the one which you see in May, which is in Gurgaon, which is the face-to-face one. Well, I guess in the current situation, that's highly unlikely to happen. And we're also running these learning shots. Today we're doing 360 people leaders, but you also have 4 more reports coming up. That's on 23rd, 28th, 30th, and 5th. Me and my colleagues are going to take you through those everything this report is. There's plenty more to learn, and I hope you'll all come back to learn more and to go through all the everything this report. That's pretty much what I have. So tomorrow we do the everything details report, and I want to make sure that if there are any questions that I could answer, I'll be happy to do that. I'll be around for a minute or two to answer any questions. With that, I'd like to close the webinar for today. Thank you.